When we look at the three Great Pyramids, we're looking at a renovation and a restoration and a enhancement of much older structures that had existed on the Giza Plateau.
Engineers stood in silence as the 2026 data rendered on their screens. The Great Pyramid base is so level it defies modern construction logic. This was done with copper chisels and rope. At least that is the official story. One specific detail about the astronomical alignment is scaring the establishment because it proves the timeline is wrong. Graham Hancock is back with proof that even university geologists cannot ignore.
The three pyramids of Giza are laid out on the ground in the pattern of the three stars of Orion's belt.
This is the moment the old world ends and a hidden history begins. I am not going to lie, this key detail can shock the world. Impossible precision in the desert. There is a sense of pride for the whole Giza Plateau because it is something special that Egypt has which other cultures do not have. There is no part of that pyramid that did not serve a practical function. In 2023, an engineering team pointed a laser scanner at the base of the Great Pyramid. They used modern equipment with millimeter precision. When the data showed up on the screen, the room went quiet. The base was not just level. It was leveled to within 0.8 inches across 755 feet. That is an accuracy of 0.0019%. For context, that beats most skyscrapers built with computer designs today. And supposedly, this was done with copper chisels and wooden sticks. The team leader stared at the numbers for a long time. He said that either something massive is missing about ancient skills or the world has been lied to about who built this. Graham Hancock has been saying exactly that for 30 years. For 30 years, mainstream archaeology laughed at him. They called him a fake scientist and a conspiracy theorist. But the thing is, they are not laughing anymore. The evidence Hancock is now presenting does not come from random people. It comes from precision engineers, university geologists, and studies reviewed by peers. It is evidence that nobody, not even his harshest critics, can explain. Let us start with what people are supposed to believe. The Great Pyramid was built around 2560 BCE by Pharaoh Khufu. Construction took 20 years. The workforce was somewhere between 20,000 and 100,000 laborers. Their tools were copper, wooden sleds, rope, and raw human muscle. The materials included 2,300,000 stone blocks. The average weight was 2.5 tons. Some blocks weigh up to 80 tons. All were moved locally, dragged across sand, and stacked with perfect precision. 20 years, copper tools, and over 2 million blocks. If one calculates the angle of the slope, it is 52 degrees on each side. If you project it further beyond the broken top, you find that the original height was 481 feet. If you do the math yourself, that is one block placed every few minutes around the clock for 20 years straight. No breaks, no errors, and no delays. This sounds like a story that is hard to believe. Christopher Dunn spent 49 years as a precision machinist. This is a man who measured aircraft parts to 1,000th of an inch for a living. Precision was his entire career. When he first analyzed the dimensions of the pyramid, he said the blood drained from his face. He said this should not exist. The four sides of the pyramid aligned to true north, south, east, and west with an error of just 3 arc minutes. That is less than 1/5 of a degree. To do that today, you need survey tools accurate to the millimeter. You need software that accounts for the curve of the earth. The ancient Egyptians supposedly did it with wooden rods and strings. Those are tools that make mistakes every time you move them. Yet the final result shows precision that makes modern engineers uncomfortable. That is not luck. That is supposedly impossible. But the measurements were just the beginning. What researchers found in the math made the precision look like a warm-up. But the math inside the stones is even more impossible than the build. Numbers that scare the experts. The math inside the Great Pyramid is enough to make any scientist stay up at night. The ratio between the height of the pyramid and the perimeter of its base equals pi. It is not just close, it is precise to multiple decimal places. The ratio between the height and half the base equals the golden ratio. This is precise to multiple decimal places as well. The structure even uses the Pythagorean theorem 2,000 years before Pythagoras was even born. Mainstream experts have one explanation. They call it a coincidence. They argue that the builders used certain tools that accidentally made these numbers without knowing the math. They are asking the world to believe that ancient workers stumbled into complex math by pure chance. One coincidence might happen. Two is very unlikely. But three separate math constants in the same building is a pattern. The math does not lie. Someone knew exactly what they were doing. There is a theory in engineering circles that mainstream archaeology refuses to touch. What if the builders had math knowledge that was not supposed to exist yet? What if the entire timeline of human history is wrong? Hands down, this is the most confusing part of the whole site. If the math is right, then the history books are wrong. The precision of the math is tied to the physical layout of the stones. For starters, the stones are fit together so tightly that you cannot even slide a credit card between them. This is true for the casing stones that used to cover the entire building. There were 115,000 of these highly polished stones. Each one weighed 15 tons. They were cut with flat surfaces to within 1/100th of an inch. To do this, you need saws that can cut through hard rock like butter. We are told they had copper. Copper is a soft metal. It cannot cut limestone or granite with that kind of speed or accuracy. When looking at the king's chamber, the granite blocks are even larger. These red granite blocks were brought from Aswan. That is a distance of over 500 miles. Each block weighs between 50 and 80 tons. They were lifted to a height of 175 feet above the ground and placed with zero room for error. If one block was off by an inch, the whole room would fail. But they are perfect. This suggests a level of planning and technology that goes far beyond what is taught in schools. This alignment points to a date that deletes our current history books. Time encoded in the bedrock. The stars tell a story that the experts do not want to hear. The 4 internal shafts of the pyramid were not random. They were aimed at specific stars as they appeared around 2500 BCE. The southern shaft from the king's chamber pointed at Orion's belt. The southern shaft from the queen's chamber pointed at Sirius. This star alignment is accepted by most experts. But in 1983, a researcher named Robert Bovell noticed something else. The 3 main pyramids at Giza are a map. Their positions on the ground match the 3 stars of Orion's belt perfectly. The way the smallest pyramid is slightly offset matches the faintest star in the belt. This connection is impossible to ignore. But here is the catch. Because of the way the Earth wobbles over thousands of years, the stars change position. The pyramids match Orion's belt most perfectly at a date of 10,500 BCE. That is 8,000 years before they were supposedly built. The stars point to a date that changes everything. Critics say this is just picking data that fits, but they cannot explain why the builders would encode 2 different dates. Why put 2500 BCE in the shafts and 10,500 BCE on the ground? Either both are on purpose or the whole thing is a massive accident. You cannot have it both ways. If the ground plan was made 10,000 years ago, it means a high-level culture existed at the end of the last ice age. This is exactly what Graham Hancock has been saying. He believes the lost civilization was destroyed by a global disaster and the survivors left these marks behind. This would explain why the earliest pyramids in Egypt are the best ones and the ones built later are much worse. Usually technology gets better over time. In Egypt, it started at the top and went down. That only happens if you are inheriting knowledge from someone else. Wait until the truth about the granite drill marks comes to light. Terrifying marks in the granite. Christopher Dunn found something else that is hard to explain. He looked at core samples drilled into granite at Giza. These samples show spiral grooves. These are marks that show how fast a drill went through the rock. The marks showed that the drill was moving into solid granite at a very high speed. Dunn did the math on this. To get those marks, you would need huge pressure and a drill spinning very fast. Modern drills with diamond tips struggle to do what these ancient tools did. The normal explanation is copper tubes and sand. People have tried this in experiments. It works, but it is very slow. It does not produce the deep grooves found in the actual samples. Some granite objects in Egypt show accuracy measured in thousandths of an inch across surfaces that are several feet long. Modern workers need high-tech machines to do this today. The idea that people did this with copper and sand is not believable to an engineer. If the Egyptians had this technology, where did it come from? And where did it go? There are no remains of high-tech machines in the dirt. But the marks on the stones are like a fingerprint. They prove that a tool was used. If the tool is not in the museum, it does not mean it did not exist. It just means we have not found it yet, or it was made of something that did not last. But the stones lasted. Granite is one of the hardest things on Earth. To shape it like we see at Giza requires power. Some people think the pyramid was not a tomb at all, but a machine. They think it might have been a power plant. This would explain why there are no decorations inside the Great Pyramid. Every other tomb in Egypt is covered in art and writing. The Great Pyramid is empty and plain. It looks like the inside of an engine, not a grave. The rain marks on the Sphinx prove the desert was once a jungle. Final proof of a lost age. Geology is now providing the biggest shock of all. Robert Schuck is a respected geologist from Boston University. He looked at the Sphinx and saw something that changed his mind about history. The erosion on the body of the Sphinx is vertical. This only happens when there is a lot of rain for a long time. It is not the kind of wear you get from wind or sand. Here is the problem. Egypt has been a dry desert for 5,000 years. For the Sphinx to have that much water damage, it must have been sitting there when Egypt was wet and green. That happened at the end of the last ice age, around 10,000 years ago. If the Sphinx is that old, it means it was built by a culture we know nothing about. It predates the pharaohs by thousands of years. Ground-penetrating radar has also found rooms and tunnels under the Sphinx and the pyramids. Some of these structures show a different style of building. One geologist said he could not sleep for weeks after seeing the data. The people in charge of history do not want to hear this. They often attack the people who bring up these questions. They say Hancock is not a real expert, but they do not explain the precision or the math. They do not explain the drill marks or the water erosion. They just say he is wrong because they do not want to change their story. But in 2023, things started to change. A team of engineers published a paper saying the precision at Giza is amazing even by modern standards. They admitted that the old story of primitive tools is getting harder to believe. Also, a place called Göbekli Tepe in Turkey was found. It is 11,600 years old. It has massive stone pillars and complex art. This proves that humans were building huge things much earlier than we thought. That date matches Hancock's timeline perfectly. The thing is, we might be looking at a global culture that was lost to time. Was a high-tech world erased from the history books before we even started? Drop a comment with your theory. If this mystery is mind-blowing, like and subscribe for more hidden truths.